If you think about RevOps people as fundamentally configure, not customize people, all of these new toolings are opening up amazing things. Playing with all these no code tools and on all this AI coding tools, and it's insane, right? And so like RevOps people are perfectly built for this new world if they have the time.
All right, everybody, welcome to this episode of the RevAmp podcast. My name is Mark Lerner. I'm the Director of Growth Marketing here at Deal Hub, and I'm super duper excited. I know I say that a lot, but I'm genuinely very excited for this episode for our guest, Andy Mowat. Andy's got a a, a resume in the go-to-market RevOps world that is, one of the most impressive I've ever seen, and we'll kind of go through all of that and talk about some of his newest ventures as well. But before we dive into all of that, Andy, why don't you go ahead and kind of tell the folks at home a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got to where you're at today?
Yeah, I have a varied background at the beginning. I guess I graduated from business school in '01, and there were no jobs, so I ended up working for a really interesting wealthy family for 7 years, helping them build businesses. At some point, I read Tim Ferriss's 4 Hour Workweek book, and I'm like, okay, I need to be in tech. And so I ended up just cold calling the CEO of what at the time was Elance that became Upwork, Fabio, and he hired me to run BD, and then he hired me to run part of his sales, and then he had me build all the systems and processes. I think I sent an email to 700,000 IT professionals that got us banned in spam. So that was not a good idea. And so I learned what I was really good at, which is kind of the data and systems and strategy for revenue. And so I've now done that for 4 unicorns: Upwork, Box, Culture Amp, and most recently Carta. In between, I often start things, and I've started my latest one now, which is Whispered. We deeply believe that your next role at the senior levels won't be posted; it'll be whispered. And so we help executives accelerate kind of their search for their next thing.
Yeah, I mean that's just an amazing kind of backstory and somewhat similar to mine. I got out of business school in 2008. So yeah, exactly. And I just couldn't, find a job, and it was a tough time of scraping through that. So I can definitely relate with you there. I think you kind of glossed over a lot there. I mean, with that kind of background, you kind of named off a bunch of unicorns, some IPOs there as well. What's really just sticks out to me is, you were the VP of RevOps at Upwork starting in 2009, and in our in like RevOps years, that's at like the very beginning of history, right? So like, very very early in the life cycle of even that role being a thing. So I'm interested to know a little bit about how um, you kind of developed what that role would be within the context of that company, that long ago, especially now as the role has become much more popularized and maybe, the playbook for it has become more kind of well known. I would imagine you're kind of building the plane as you were flying it, not only the company, but like the role itself.
Yeah, I mean, at Upwork, I'd say like there was two. We were. I joined at an interesting point when we still just had like a team of people that would talk to like people applying on the website, right? Or buyers of services applying on the website. And at some point, I think probably asked me, can I like take over that team? And so I spent a lot of time just trying to understand like were they actually accelerating deal closures, or were they just like touching stuff that was going to close anyway, right? And I think it was really interesting because we were dealing with like a commission team, a lot of inflexibility, and so I spent a lot of time, and at some point I came to the conclusion like, no, they weren't adding any value, right? So we were, and so we made some of those early decisions. I think for me, like a lot of RevOps people are self-taught. It may not be the case, and so like if you ask somebody who's been doing it for 3 or 4 times, we've all kind of like had to figure this stuff out ourselves. So I have this like massive intellectual curiosity, right? And as you get more senior, you don't get to touch systems anymore, and so that's an interesting balance as well too. So I mean, I guess I'd say is like I've just figured it out. Like I'm not. There are very few classic RevOps people. Like those are maybe the people that all worked at Salesforce, and then they can go and like be the senior strategy. Like for me, I kind of like fell into it, and then I went to Box, and I was running all post sale ops, and they were like, "Hey, our head of ops quit. Like, can you do that too? And I was like, yeah, I can do that too. And then when I went to Culture Amp, they're like, we want you to run the whole thing. I'm like, great. And it's amazing because you don't have commissions. So we took a company from 5 million to 150 million in revenue with no commissions, which was amazing. Right. So like, I'm a very non-traditional where like, I don't bring the comp side of things to the table. Like I've always had territory planning, routing, all of that stuff. But I haven't had that like little piece, which is the commissions until we get to Carta. And then at Carta, they were in finance. Right. So for me, anytime I need to deal with commissions, I just have a really strong number two.
That's, I mean, that's it's interesting. One of the things that I often hear from RevOps folks is, this kind of figuring it out on their own and building the playbook, not really kind of relying on a tried and true, and like also just kind of falling into it, right? So a lot of people come from the sales world and end up, oh, well, I kind of enjoyed building stuff in the background, and that kind of slowly developed into RevOps as well. So there's kind of themes that I see often, but you've had this really unique experience and viewpoint over a long period of time where you kind of led and oversaw you know ops within the go to market for these very well known companies, and scaled, like you said, very very large. So, across all those experiences, what were some of those like common traits that you think, high performing orgs um, have? And, what were some of the kind of commonalities that you saw?
Yeah, I mean, I think organizations don't make good decisions on prioritization. So, or like, and so a lot of A, I can get my hands dirty in the systems. B, I love just thinking through like how are people making decisions. So I can run through a couple, right? Like I won't name companies, but I can name scenarios. And some of these are companies that I actually worked at. Others are ones where friends will call me and I'll advise them. Like I've got one 150 million ARR company right now that I'm helping. But I think what I oftentimes see where people are like, cool, buy a tool, then kind of figure out how to use it versus let's think through like, why do we need it? Who's involved? Who should be there? What success criteria are? How we will integrate it thoughtfully like that, right? And so what you end up with is I showed up at one company and they literally had like three tools that they'd bought 9 months ago and they never implemented. And you're just like, decision making sucks here, right? And so a lot of it, like I think I can both get deep into the weeds with architecture and strategy and like conversion optimization, but I can also like I see a lot of companies just not think through in a cohesive, coordinated framework across their entire go-to-market and systems teams, like how to buy tools, how to set them up for success. And that's where you need to have a RevOps team that is super empowered versus just like, here's a tool, go fix it. Right. And that's just going to be a shit show every time.
Yeah. And I think that there is often this default to like the tool, right? And that, that happens so many times over and over again. Every time someone new comes in, they want to bring their favorite tool. And then you get this kind of shelfware that is getting, compounding over time. And there's all these artifacts in different places. And one of the themes, trends that I've seen over the last 2 3 years, um, is, we went from a world where there was budgets were kind of infinite and everybody got to have their own, solution that they wanted. And that got pretty crazy. And then, budgets kind of went the other direction. And we're seeing, I think, and maybe, I don't know if you've observed this as well, more of a consolidation, cutting out a lot of that fat, consolidating on core platforms. And whatever you had those like point solutions doing, maybe kind of make it work with the core platform that we have. um a Is that an observation that you've had as well, and B, how do you think that impacts somebody kind of in the RevOps role?
Yeah, I mean, CFOs always want consolidation. I think there's waves within the tool stack of let's spawn a bunch of new little things that people try and then let's consolidate in, right? Like I feel like where do I think we're at right now? I think we're at the tail end of a consolidation wave.
Oh,
And so I feel like with all this AI stuff, there's all these new little things. I think companies at the scale I generally work at are not excited to like go get a lot of crappy little vendors, and they're kind of waiting for those bigger vendors to kind of roll those features out. And new vendors with AI are so aggressively moving on it that I feel like that's okay, right? So there's a lot of these vendors. I mean, I won't name the vendor, but I was at like the Scale Ventures conference last week, and we were talking. There's a RevOps summit. And we were talking about this, and like a lot of people were using this tool, and I'm like, yeah, I'm aware of that tool. Like, I know it will come in these other three systems within 3 to 6 months, and so am I really going to go out and do a new buy on that type of thing? And so I think this kind of like these waves of bring it in, bring it out. Like I think I would anticipate over the next. I see the entire go to market stack blowing up in the next 3 to 5 years, right? Like this whole world, like Salesforce is kind of dying. Everyone fucking hates Marketo. And these systems are like built in like silos rather than they work across the infrastructure, right? So I get really excited about companies like Inflection.io, which is building marketing automation on top of the data warehouse, right? And so then all of a sudden, if everything's built on top of the data warehouse, integrations become, like less critical in some ways, and you get to be able to use all of your data, right? So, right, I oftentimes see like everyone has a Marketo or a HubSpot that plugs into the CRM, but it doesn't work very well with product data. And then on the other side, you'll have like an Iterable or a Braze, which does nothing with the go to market. And so you literally are like, okay, cool, we're going to do an email campaign. Who are we doing it to? Well, we want to send this message to both prospects and customers. Well, which system do we do? Well, HubSpot's the prospect system, and or Marketo, and then there's this Iterable and Braze, and so we kind of have to do this out of both, and it's just a total shit show, right? And so, sorry, I keep swearing, but I hope it's
Don't worry
okay.
about it.
And so, like, this is why I love the vision of Inflection. I see like I wrote an article recently on your next CRM is your data warehouse, and I deeply believe it, right? Like, I don't need it in a separate SaaS app. I need it on top of my data, and then I need that right UX and all of that. And so I remember that article, that thing of like, I forget the name of the company, but like Klaviyo
Klarna.
or something like that, where they were like, we're no longer using Salesforce. And I'm okay,
Klarna.
yeah. And I'm like, that's where I think this world's going. And so I help a lot of companies that are driving innovation in that area.
Yeah. So that Klarna story fascinated me because there was a whole lot of people that were like, "Oh, he's just trying to get buzz," or like for their IPO or whatever it was. I don't remember what they were trying to do, but even as just like a mental exercise about the concept of what he was talking about, to me is like that's the kind of logical endpoint of this. Maybe to the extreme, but getting rid of CRM, they have knowledge graphs and data and an AI that kind of integrates with that. And to me, I don't know the timeline for that, um, but it seems like eventually we get there. But in that case, you're mentioning that the GTM stack is going blowing up, is very bullish about that. How does that jive with this idea that maybe there is no stat, it's just kind of AI and knowledge graphs and user data behind it?
I think you still need solid data pipelines, thoughtful data architecture, right? Because yeah, AI is good, but if you're just dumping data in a thing, structure and metadata around data will help AI make it more useful. And so I think the idea that I'm just going to all my data into one place and hope it figures it out, like maybe, but like I doubt that. And so, but you need ways to get into it, get out of it. Like I'm playing a lot with that with Whispered right now, right? Which is we have some really unique data sources, and how do I put AI on top of those in a thoughtful way where it can get people the right insights out of them? And so I think there's a lot of work on that. I like every time it's been fun. I went from managing a large team at Carta to basically building on top of all these technologies. And so I get to really roll my sleeves up and see what's possible and what's not. And you learn the limitations of this stuff for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I don't know, to what level you're, in the weeds, but someone who's not traditionally technical, I say, over the last two or so years, I've really pushed myself to leverage these new tools that are really democratizing that knowledge to do things that, all the wild and wacky ideas that I've ever had, kind of manifest them with AI. And I find it very exciting and scary a little bit about the potential. But um, I wasn't necessarily planning on going this deep into the AI thing, but I think it's kind of inevitable. In, exactly, in any conversation, it's like it's inevitable. Um, I think given all these tooling and the AI and everything, one of the things I'm noticing is that, I kind of live in two worlds. I live in the marketing world, because that's kind of technically the role I play. And then I also live in the RevOps world just because that's the people I interact with. The marketing world, AI is just everywhere, everything. It's the best thing that ever happened to the entire world. There's nothing anyone does that doesn't involve AI. In the RevOps world, I notice that most of my conversations, maybe save for this one, when I bring up AI, yeah, they're interested in it, but it's very reserved. That I don't often hear like any sort of tangible use case that's happening. It's mostly kind of theoretical. And it just really seems like the uptake of AI in the workflow of someone in RevOps has been much less than in other kind of parts of the organization. I don't know if that's just what I'm observing or if that's real, and maybe you have any insight into why that might be.
I mean, fundamentally, the systems architecture is old school, right? Which is going to be hard, right? And Salesforce will show up and like wow you with like
Right.
AI, it's I mean, nobody bought Einstein, like like this is Einstein 2.0, right? Like it's and so I'd say that I'm seeing use cases. So data, Clay and Scale Stack. I think Clay's really I love it. I've been using it for 3 years and love the team, but it's really fucking hard to use, right? And so you got to have I mean like it's insanely hard, and so you can and then there's Scale Stack, which is a new emerging vendor, which is kind of like similar to Clay, but much more designed for enterprise. That I think is insanely powerful. And so there's that. I see a lot of use cases in the enablement world, right? Like, and sometimes enablement is RevOps, sometimes it's not. I think probably in the classic, I wouldn't put it in there, but for me, I've had it. So I think there's a lot there. I just think it's like RevOps is overloaded. Most CEOs and CFOs don't appreciate like what RevOps does. They're like, oh, we don't need as many of those people. You're like, well, because your architecture was so stupid in the first place. Yes, you do. And if you'd empowered them at the beginning, it was amazing at Culture Amp. I joined at 5 million. I was the only RevOps person for the first month, and I built it up to 150. But we were thoughtful about every architecture decision we made, and so we didn't get behind the eight ball, right? Like we put in attribution early, we put in CPQ early, we did all these things, and so I think there's a lot of tech debt, and RevOps people are overloaded, and every RevOps director or more senior I talk to is like, how do I explain to my senior folks that I need more resources? And at the same time, everyone's cutting them, right? So like they don't have time to work on the AI stuff. I think one of the things I get pissed off at is when they're like this GTM engineering will not roll up to RevOps. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense, right? You're just basically like more of like, let's just patch stuff together. And so like, I believe GTM engineering, if you need it, I question whether you need that role long term or whether that's just a term that Clay created to justify how fucking complicated their stuff is. But B, I get really angry when that's like, let's build a little separate department for that, because then you've got two departments tripping over each other versus one. So if I was a CEO, I would add a couple more headcount to RevOps, get their chin above water, get some of the tech debt done, and then empower them to really drive. Like we were exploring before I left at Carta, let's hire 1 to 2 people within RevOps that can drive and automate things. But the problem is they don't have enough resources to do that. So unless you add those people, you're not going to be able to do that. And so I think this is my rant of saying RevOps is amazing. People should invest more in it and stop doing workarounds on it. And then maybe RevOps will be able to drive a little bit of AI. And then I think our core operating systems, our CRM, our marketing automation, our CS systems, and our data systems, like we need a next gen of those things. Probably also CPQ, Mark.
Working on it. Um, yeah, and I think, I mean, there's so much there, but you look at, let's say, since we're name dropping and talking about these systems, Salesforce, right? They have, I think, early on realized that this change is coming, and they're now an quote unquote AI company, right? Everything is agent force. They have Matthew McConaughey in the rain or whatever.
That is ridiculous, right? Like I remember when they hired that guy, and then they fired a bunch of people at the company at the same time, right? Like I, I love Matthew McConaughey; he's my second favorite actor, uh, but those ads are just like
And like the thing that the ad is like it got him a seat indoors when it was raining or didn't, like that was the main use
you got
case.
to remember. I learned the other day, Salesforce makes more revenue off of Support Cloud than they do off of Sales Cloud, and so like that's talking about like how do I help a restaurant book something? It's not talking about B2B, right? Like Salesforce is definitely like they've gone beyond their core foundational.
Sure. I actually saw that as well. I don't know if it was you that posted it on LinkedIn or someone did. I thought that was interesting. But they're just all about this agent force thing. Yet, they talk about agent force, but I think I read something like, they have like 5,000 users. Ooh, 5,000. But if you think about how many people use Salesforce, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands, millions, whatever it is. 5,000 is a fraction of, a tiny amount of people. And it's the thing they're putting front and center. It seems like there maybe the cart is before the horse here, and then I wonder if people are becoming a little too bullish on uptake of agents and all these things, especially at larger companies. Are we are is are we are we in a hype cycle a little bit on this?
I've tuned out the word agent now. If somebody says, "Hey, I've got agents for you," like I'd say 75% of the time it's not an agent, or maybe 90%. I remember I was at like Dreamforce 8 years ago, and I asked the guys like, "Hey, does it have any AI?" He's like, "You want more AI? I'll just put some more if statements in it." Right? I'm like, yeah, cool." It's like that's. I think I mean, I get pinged by a founder a day, being like, "Hey, I love your background. I'm building something." It's like agents on top of CRM and Gong data, right? You're like, okay, like I know what you're going to build feels cool to you. It is objectively couldn't have been built 3 years ago, but the fact that you can do it means that hundreds of other people are doing it too. And so it's just like the market noise is overwhelming. Like I haven't seen anything new and innovative in a while.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's also a function of like, at least I'm becoming desensitized to some of the magic, right? Like if I use something like vo.dev, objectively amazing, right? You can say about, type a bunch of things and a fully functioning application is just kind of manifested in front of you. But like over and over again, I kind of lose the wonder a little bit. And, I think, I think taking it back to the RevOps conversation, is this the domain of people in RevOps? Like, should they, even if they can't necessarily 100%, embed this into their workflow today, are these skills and, understanding and interaction with these tools and learning how to maybe kind of build internally using AI, are these skills that RevOps needs to own in order to kind of build that kind of moat around their careers as we move into this next um, wave, whatever it is?
Yeah. I mean, data was a skill before AI. Like I wouldn't hire. I really wanted people to have the profile where they understood how to write SQL. Now that's not as important, but I think understanding data is important. Understanding how to use these AI tools is important. I've got to. Yeah, I mean, it's hard. Like, I mean, I talked to a person that is running RevOps at a $75 million ARR company, a sole practitioner, and this person is like swamped and can't figure out how to make more arguments for more resources. Like, how is that person gonna use AI, right? Like, they don't have any time, right? That's just a classic. I know many companies where it's like they've cut their RevOps to the bone, and so like I feel for these people. I was one of these people. I got really good early. I remember Box, one of the C-level folks, was like, "You're not getting any more headcount until your stakeholders give it to you." I was like, "Sweet, great, we'll play that game," right? So I really focused on helping people understand the value we could drive, feeling the kind of like making trade-offs and forcing trade-offs. And like the next quarter, I got like 6 headcount, right? Everyone's like Andy's team can. I'd rather have a person dedicated on Andy's team than I would hire another rep. And I was like, amazing, great, right? And so like I think a lot of RevOps is just not good at asking for explaining why they need headcount.
Yeah, I think it's this interesting dynamic where, especially if you're kind of fighting for the same scraps with, let's say, the sales org, and that org is made with a bunch of people who sell every day and are very kind of gregarious, and maybe people that are RevOps typically, not always, aren't. They kind of lose out on that resource allocation. That's another conversation I often kind of hear.
At the same time, like I don't sympathize for RevOps. And they're like, I need more headcount. I need more headcount. Like that's not effective, right? Like
Right.
what is effective is awesome, cool. Here's all your prioritized projects. These are the ones I'm attacking. Do you disagree with the prioritization? No, great, awesome. Like, hey, you have a new project. That's eighth on the list. Do you want to swap anything out? Like forcing people to make trade-offs is how you'll get resources, not bitching and moaning about like I need headcount, right? So like I give that speech to a lot of RevOps people at like the director level who are struggling.
Yeah. Yeah, so we talked a lot about some of the very well-known companies and organizations that you've been a part of, but part of your journey is jumping off IPO and moving into starting something from scratch. You did it with Gated, which I think really made a big splash, at least in my world. And then recently you started Whispered. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how do you come to find that idea and say, hey, I'm going to make a product out of this? Is it born of a challenge that you have internally within like your role? And then how do you kind of follow that interest all the way to execution?
Yeah, I'll focus on the whispered one. So I've felt this pain. I mean, Whispered at a fundamental level is a platform to help executives collaborate on company insights, like what's behind the scenes on companies, unposted roles, tactics, and connections and network. Right? Like that's what we do. Um, we think there's a lot of whispers in the job market and all that. And so, three times you and I talked about like, one in '08 and 2015. And then most recently when I joined Carta, like I was coming off of something that was hard to explain. And I had to really build those tactics of how to do that. And so I got the tactics and I've been writing on that for years. And people always talk to me. I'm highly networked and then I love to connect people. Right. And so I've been helping people with their careers their whole career. And I know how scary it is as we get more and more senior, right? You pop your head up and you're like, crap, like my network is stale, the jobs aren't posted. I don't even know how the game is played in this like venture talent recruiter community. All of those people have moved on to different roles. And so about 2 years ago, when I was kind of like looking for my next role, I just called all my friends and I'm like, hey, you're VP of RevOps. Like when you see a role, can you give it to me? And then I called like CROs and people like that too. And so we started having those people contribute that. Plus, like, what do you learn when you interview with the company? And so I started out in an Airtable. Before I joined Carta, I bought the domain, and then I kind of just I used it as like for me it's like work separation, right? Like when I obsess over work, and so for me, Whispered was the ability to like leave work behind in the evenings when the kids are asleep and my wife's also working, and so I was just like iterate on it, build on it, keep working on the tech, getting my hands really dirty, learning how to code, and I found a great partner in a dev as well too, who's been helping me. And then I just spent a lot of time talking to like talent teams and recruiters and just understanding how they work, right? And so like one of the things we learned is talent teams of venture firms don't actually know most of the unposted roles in their own portfolios, right? And so we then have that data, and so we know what, and so we're able to put that all together and do amazing things. So for me, it's just been like the ability to iterate on it without having to take funding and I've done that twice. Gated, we eventually took money. Whispered, I don't know if I ever will.
Yeah. I explain it. So I do some similar things, in my free time. I'd like to just follow the rabbit in my head down the crazy ideas. And with some of these tools now, I think I have 6 different AI tools open on my screen right now. And so I explained to my wife that, some guys have like a shed where they build stuff on the weekends. I do this on my
Wow, wow, we should geek out together then more, Mark. Well, yeah, it's awesome to see that stuff.
Yeah, I mean it's fascinating. So, and the reason I had asked the question the way I did is that I often will build things based on a challenge I have in my role or with I see within my organization where I think I can solve it, right? So once I see somebody exporting and importing a CSV somewhere, I'm like, okay, there's a better way. And so I do that a lot. I get a lot of satisfaction out of it, and I get back to the point where I'm like, how come I'm not seeing people in ops roles, maybe in smaller companies, kind of doing that as well? And maybe that because it's just not technically the role, right? Maybe this is the GTM engineer. I don't know, um, but it's still strange to me that it isn't more kind of widespread.
I think if you think about RevOps people as fundamentally configure, not customize people, all of these new toolings are opening up amazing things, right? Like I always accepted, like I'm not the guy that's going to build the Salesforce code. Um, but now with new platforms, like literally there's an API now that from our company I've invested in where you can literally like write Salesforce. You don't have to go right on force.com anymore. You can literally like do that stuff. Right. And so, I mean, you're probably playing with all these no code tools and on all this AI coding tools, and it's insane. Right. And so like RevOps people are perfectly built for this new world if they have the time.
Yeah, so I guess that's the bottleneck, as they say, is time, which I guess it is for all of us, right? Uh, so you know, I it's we're obviously like it's been a crazy few years, right? And we kind of had the explosion of we had COVID, then we had the money bazooka and crazy budgets, then we had the kind of inverse of that, and like you said, you think we're kind of on the tail end of this consolidation cycle. So, as we round things out here, what happens as that consolidation cycle ends? Like, what does the new cycle around that kind of look like?
I mean, I feel like it's lovable and cursor and but you're going to need to get your data in a better place, in a better architecture place. And once you get it in a better place, RevOps will be able to build little tools on top of it really fast. And so I feel like we're a year to 2 years away. But I know a lot of friends that are hacking on this stuff too, right? So it's we got to get away from these legacy platforms.
Yeah, yeah, I agree, and I think I think that there are people that are missing the boat. There are people that are potentially kind of over-indexing. Like it's really the kind of thing you have to play just right. If you're a legacy player, I think this is a great opportunity for the kind of startups to kind of take on the space. But you know, before we kind of round things out here, Andy, if you want, tell the folks at home where maybe they can learn more about what you're doing, about you, and Whispered as well. Now is a great time to kind of put it out there.
Yeah, whispered.com. I whispered a secret to you. We have the deepest database of unposted go to market roles, tons of free resources on career. There's the AI version of Andy. You can chat with about your career. Don't drop me a blind LinkedIn message with nothing in the damn subject. I'll just reject it. But go to Whispered, play around with it, submit your stuff, and I will find you.
All right. Well, Andy Mowat, I really appreciate your time today. This was an absolutely fascinating conversation, and I can't wait to see what Whispered has in store for us.